As far as final thoughts and rating on That Time You Killed Me, I'm giving this one a 3.5 out of 5. Now, I really do like a lot of the elements of this game, but there's enough small things that detract. Get it? This is a game about time travel, so I'm doing my final thoughts out of order. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing That Time You Killed Me, designed by Peter Hayward and from Pandasaurus Games, and That Time You Killed Me is a two-player abstract game of time travel, in which you're trying to jump around from various timelines, the past, the present, and the future, in order to kill your opponent as many times as possible. That's basically what's happening here. The general idea of the game is you're going to be defining both in terms of the actions you can take, as well as where you're taking those actions. So what you're going to do on your turn is you're going to look at where your current marker is, and you're going to take two actions with one of the pawns in that location. If you have several pawns in that location, you choose one to be the active pawn. With that pawn, you get to do a few different actions. You can go ahead and move. That's an action. You can do that as many times as you want. Look at that. I moved again. That's two actions right there. Alternatively, you can go ahead and jump around from the different timelines. So I can make a jump to the past, although whenever you jump to the past, you leave a copy of yourself in the present. That's going to be how you get new pawns into the board in this interesting time travel mechanism. Now, you can't jump directly to the past. You have to jump from one timeline to the next. So I can go ahead, if I wanted, on my turn. Let's pretend this is my move over here. If it's my turn, taking two actions, I can go ahead and jump to the past, jump to the present technically, and then jumped again to the past, leaving my tokens over there. That would be two actions over there. The other actions you can take, well, those are really the actions you can take. You can jump to the future, you can jump to the past, and you can move around the board, at least until we get into some of the expansion modules over here. Now, when you're done with that, you're going to take a token and you're going to move it to a new arena, whichever one you want, well, except for the one you started in, and then it's your opponent's turn. Your opponent's going to take their turn, and they're also going to be moving around, taking different actions, although, again, the nature of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it is where this game tends to shine. So, for example, I can go over here, and then let's pretend I pop this over here. That would make more sense, I guess, not particularly. Let's leave it where it is, but I can go ahead and jump over here, then I can jump to the future. Awesome, great. And then it's my opponent's turn, and I'm going to show you how inefficient a move that was, because it's my opponent's turn over here, but first I have to move this to over there, or anywhere really. And my opponent's going to take a turn, and they're going to go ahead and 1, 2, pushing me into the wall, and I am squished. They take my token, and now one of my lives are gone. If at the end of any opponent's turn, if at the end of my turn, I check my opponents, if my opponent is present in only one of the three timelines, they lose. You have to always be present in at least two timelines, and you always check that at the end of your turn. So at the end of your turn, you don't check yourself, you check your opponent, which means you can actually exist in only one timeline, as long as you make sure to kill your opponents while doing so. Other things that can happen in this game is you can run into paradoxes. If an opponent pushes you into yourself, well, that just causes a paradox. You can never see yourself on the same timelines. You're going to remove those pieces. Then you're going to rinse and repeat that little puzzle of jumping forward, actually leaving the past behind, jumping to the past, creating copies of yourself, pushing your opponents into walls, pushing your opponents into each other. You could have an interesting situation where you push your opponent, let's pretend like this over here. This is a totally legal push, where I push myself that way, although nothing really happens. It's not that satisfying, and in fact, I'm just setting my opponent up for a fairly mean squish over there, although I guess you could, nope, it's just not a good move over there. That's basically what's going on in the base game of That Time You Killed Me, although these expansion modules all come in your base game, so it's not like separate purchase or anything like that. So, we have three basic expansions, and then one kind of group everything together. We're going to talk about these three very quickly, very briefly. We have the plants expansion. The plants expansion, what this one does over here, is you're going to have seeds, shrubs, and trees. Now, when you plant a seed in the past, you can take an action to plant a seed. As you might imagine, with times and all that stuff, we are going to have a bush in the present and a tree in the future. You can plant a tree in the present, and then in which case you'll have a bush in the future. And now you can knock over trees as well, which leads to fun little interactions where you take a knocking over action and knock over the tree onto that spot, and or push opponents onto that spot like so, killing them. That's basically what happens with the trees. You're creating these bushes. If you knock into a bush, you die. If you knock into a tree, well, you die too. Additionally, you can unplant a seed. When you unplant a seed, you remove all evidence of that seed's existence from any single timeline. This is going to add another new dimension to the puzzle as you're mindful of objects in the space you were previously inhabiting all alone. From there, we're going to have the various statues expansion. The statues are going to give players their own individual statues of their color, as well as a neutral statue that's going to start on one of the spaces of the board. It's actually over here, the 7. So we're going to go ahead and put those down. Statues in general are tied to the past existence of the statue, such that when you move a statue, it affects all copies in the future. So for example, if I push the statue, well, these are also going to push knocking into, let's remove those from the board, knocking into all existence of the statue, which means if I push this again, I can go ahead and knock this forward and knock that Well, actually, he's over here, but you get the idea over there. Now, the fun part is statues can become disconnected, because if I knock this statue, well, this statue will move and this statue will move, but the past does not, which leads to a fun little puzzle that as you start moving around statues, you can have statues disconnected from each other, but you still are always mindful of the past. If I go ahead and I move here and pull the statue, because you can do that as well, you're going to have situations where statues are going to be moving. Even though they are disconnected from the present location, they are still feeling those ramifications of being tugged and pushed and pulled around the board. That is basically the statue expansion. Plus, you as a player have the opportunity to build a new statue at any given point. Well, one point in the game you can build your statues. Depending on where you build them, if you build them in the present, you'll only build in the present and the future. If you build in the future, you will only build in the future. If you build in the past, you'll build in all 3 locations. So for example, I can go ahead, take a build action over here, knocking into, well, my color over there. I'll take a build action, building that there. Because I can't build over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to knock and push that opponent, or me really, 1 space forward, which can be good or bad depending on the situation. And then this will also do so as well. There's some interesting interactions as far as when you can or can't build, when you can or can't push, small things like that. But you're basically going to be building in a spot and then transferring that build to the future. And then once those are on the board, you're done with your build, and you now have more statues to rearrange around the board. Again, another little interesting puzzle as far as how the game integrates those and gives you different decision spaces. And then you have the elephants. I still haven't decided which one of these is my favorite, but you have the elephants. Elephants are going to start in the corners of the board. You're going to have elephants like so, and you have the opportunity to train elephants. Now, elephants live a very long lifespan, and so when you train them, they remember, which means if I walk over here and I train that elephant, I'm going to put my own little hat on it, I will also train future implementations of said elephant, because he's just remembering that training. And you can train your opponent's elephants as easily as you can train an empty elephant. So just go ahead, walk up to them, take a train action, all future implementations and current implementation will be trained. Once your elephants are trained, you can go ahead and start moving them around the board with an action. And the fun part is elephants love to trample people. At least that's what the rulebook tells me, and I take the rulebook at face value. Why wouldn't I? It's very serious and very legitimate. But elephants like to trample human beings. They love it. They can't get enough of it, in fact. And so you're going to have elephants who start being trained and start rampaging around the board, which can lead to fun little implementations where you pop yourself into a future timeline and then immediately walk that elephant over to that person, trampling them, which is tremendously satisfying, although the hats don't stay on as well as I would like them to, and that's going to be what the elephant modules bring to the table. Again, some detailed interactions as far as how training works. What happens if you train this elephant? Does it affect that one? What happens if you train this elephant, but really your color is already that and that color? I'm not getting into the details. The basic idea is training elephants and having interactions with them and being able to command them and jump them around the board as you wander around that time you killed me. And then finally, the last module gives you the opportunity and the ways to mix and match different modules, playing with any one module, playing with any combination of 2 modules, as well as giving you specific combos, these little packages of cards that you can unlock when you hit specific milestones. Have control of all 3 elephants. Win the game without losing any of your pieces. Win the game with pieces with the different things. I don't remember all of them. There's a whole bunch of packages in here that you can unlock. They'll give you different fun little things based on specific criteria that you have met as you played, won, or lost. I think it's always won that time you killed me. That's what's going on here. We have an abstract, a modular abstract with different modules you can plug in, modules you can combine, a fun little rulebook that is a fun little rulebook, which is a good time to jump into ease of play. Rules are excellent, incredibly clear. Not only are they incredibly clear, they are incredibly humorous at the same time. I love it, and not everyone does, but I love it when a rulebook is fun to read, when I can't get enough of the side text in the rulebook because there's funny little interactions, and the rulebook has that. So it's entertaining, it's engaging, it's clear, a solid rulebook. As far as player time and all that, this is a game that's going to run you maybe 30 minutes per session. It can vary because obviously you can spend more time thinking through things or less time thinking through things, but generally around 30 minutes per session, and table space is absolutely minimal. As far as player count, it's a 2-player game. I have played this at 2 players. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. So, a few things here. The game is very thinky, very solid and thinky game, giving you a lot of interactions and a lot of opportunities for clever play, for combo play. And because of the nature of this moving around, your opponents can't always react to it, which means this game does do a good job of avoiding some of the pitfalls I've seen with certain abstract games, where players who get too good at it can start just getting into a bit of a stalemate, of being too defensive and not having things move forward. This game does a great job of having the game constantly move forward, that way you can constantly set up basically traps of your actions, of basically where you can't stop your opponent from doing something. If I move this here and move that here and move this here, well, sooner or later I'm going to be taking down your pieces, and while you have 7 pawns, it's not going to be enough. And the fact that as you run out of times means you can't move to the past anymore, because you can't create a move that would create a copy of yourself if you've run out of copies to create of yourself. I find that doesn't matter how good players get. I find that when you get better at the game, you end up being better at catching your opponent, but the game doesn't devolve into a stalemate, which I particularly like. And the variability in the execution is excellent because you have that base game, which feels like you got a nice little fun puzzle, but the game gives you kind of this taste of, but what's next, but what's more? It's simple, it's to the point, it does a good job, but I kind of want more, and the game gives you 3 or 4 nice little packages of more. Each of these puzzles gives you a different way to implement, to interact with the exact same core elements, and when you start throwing them together, that gives you even more. Having, like, statues and elephants, what happens? Can the statues push and pull the elephants? They can, which is a lot of fun, and so the game gives you a lot of ways to have these fun little interactions using the core system combined with the modules, and each one giving you small little opportunities to just get things done, to find the pattern, to be able to move your person, move your token, move your positioning, and just get another kill. Slowly take out your opponent, trample them with elephants, shove them into walls with statues. The statues might be my favorite. I think the statues are my favorite, because when you pull a statue here and it results in pulling here and results in shoving them into walls, it's incredibly satisfying. I like the elephants a lot. Can get a little stalematey. The trees I love a lot, but I don't love how the trees are primarily on the future board, and so you don't get to full implementation. The statues are probably my favorite. This is a little bit of a tangent over there, but I like the variability of the experience. And then, of course, the unlocked content as well, giving you even more stuff to the game, giving it almost a legacy feel without really being a legacy game. But that combination of kind of campaign of leading one module to the next, one module to the next, and then starting to combine them and starting to unlock content, a lot of ways to experience and enjoy That Time You Killed Me. As far as what I don't like about the game, it can feel like you're going to lose as soon as you have 1 or 2 pawns taken. Despite having 7 pawns on each side, I find that once a player gets a little bit behind, if it's not tit for tat, knocking you off, knocking me off, knocking you off, then it does tend to devolve into, you got 2 kills, and now you're going to stomp me. I might get 1 kill in here, but you're going to get a lot more of the kills. Your positioning is just going to be better. And so, while I have had games that come down to the last 2 on each side, and it's a really tense back and forth, and it does devolve the closest into that stalemate aspect just because you don't have a lot going on, I find more often than not, it results in a snowball. One player gets the lead, and then the other player just kind of feels like they're going to get stomped before, or trampled by an elephant. Additionally, some modules are better than others. Like I said, the statues are my favorite. I like the elephants probably the second most. The trees, I kind of like the promise of them. That idea of removing a seed in the past and clearing the board in the present and the future is very fun, but the trees get a little stalemate. The shrubs tend to take up space and tend to not result in things to push people into, so much as just clogging up the center and top board. I like all of them. I like all of them in terms of what they add to the game, but they're better than others over there. As far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, it can be hard to see the patterns. If you can't get into that thinky aspect of what's happening and how the present affects the past and how the past affects the present never affects the past always affects the present, but stuff like that. If you're playing the statue module and you're like, I got this clever move, and you knock a statue, and you're like, you try knocking a statue in the past, and I'm like, no, you don't move the statue in the past. Remember, I told you, when you push a statue, it only affects future timelines. And you'll have these interactions as you play with people where they just don't necessarily see exactly how things work, because the game is operating in 3 different timelines with rules around those timelines, rules that are not always intuitive. In fact, I'll get into a little nitpick over here. When you train a statue in the past, because training only carries from one timeline to the next, if White over here tries to go over here, let's give a specific situation. When White, this is a good situation right here. When White tries to train that elephant, and they take that elephant's hat off, replacing it with their own, because the present status of this elephant over here was not changed, we're not going to carry it to the future. It only carries when the hat changes. And since this hat didn't change, that hat doesn't change either. Which doesn't make sense to me thematically. Thematically, shouldn't you be training all of them? If I change his status, it should carry up the line regardless of whether this was already White or not. Additionally, even the fact that when you jump back in time, it leaves a copy of yourself, instead of the fact when you jump forward in time, I would imagine jumping forward in time leaves a copy of yourself. I've watched Avengers Endgame. I know how this works. It's when you move to the future that you have branching timelines. When you move to the past, you can actually leave yourself behind. So why that way? There's some small little inconsistencies in the logic of how things work that can lend itself to being harder to see the patterns, to being directly into what's going on in this game and how do things work. And so it can be hard to get behind that, and if you don't get behind that, someone's going to smash you into a wall. You're going to die as you go through the game when that happens, which leads to the next thing, as far as what I can see others not liking. It's easy to make mistakes. If you're not used to abstracts, or forget that, even if you're used to abstracts, it can be easy to find yourself being pushed into walls, having statues run you over, and having elephants step on your dead body, which it's good because you have 7 dead bodies to spare, actually probably like 5 dead bodies to spare. Once you lose your 6th dead body, you're going to lose the game. But yeah, it can be easy to make mistakes, it can be easy to not see certain patterns, and that it might make this a frustrating experience, especially if you're playing against somebody who does see all those patterns and is doing a good job. They're feeling particularly clever, and you're feeling particularly frustrated, which might make this not a game for you. As far as final thoughts on That Time You Killed Me, this one's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. I really like a lot of the things this game is doing, but there's some small nitpicks that have taken it away from being, I don't know, a keeper, I guess. And I went back and forth in this one. This one started off as a 4, went to a 3.5, went back and forth. I think this game is brilliant in what it's doing. And I think it does an excellent job. And the way it gives you those packages is a lot of fun. And yet also, as I played the game more and more and more, I found myself finding that compelled and I enjoyed my process and my time with it. I liked going through the patterns. I liked unlocking things. I liked combining modules. I liked seeing the various things. But I don't necessarily have that same drive to continue to dive back into it again and again, although factor in that I have 10 plus plays under my belt, so again and again is a relative term. I've certainly enjoyed my experiences with this, and I've enjoyed unlocking new patterns, new puzzles, but they all rely on a certain trick. A trick that at times has you feeling particularly clever, and at times has you feeling like you've played this, you've done the system, you've done the patterns, you know what to look for. I don't know where this one lies for me. I mean, I do. It's a 3.5 out of 5. I really like a lot of elements. I think this is a solid game worth trying, especially if you like abstract strategy games, because you might find this one lands even further than where I am. Like, I've gone back and forth. I like a lot of things this game is doing, although I should have included in the don't like section that I find the components to be not the best. These hats don't stay on very well. These tokens feel like a bad warped 3D printer printed them out. Overall, lots of promise, lots of whatever, but I feel the component quality is a little subpar, especially for Pandasaurus, who usually does a tremendous job with their stuff. Some of the stuff are nicer than others, but I digress. I like That Time You Killed Me. I think it's a good game, and especially if you like abstract games, you should check this one out. As far as other game recommendations, I'm going to have 2 over here. First of all, Onitama from Arcane, that's Arcane Wonders. Yeah, Arcane Wonders. Onitama has an interesting puzzle mechanism of kind of, not really time travel in the typical sense, but it has that same puzzly element of trying to think a turn or two in advance, as you have these pieces that whenever you put a piece down, you're eventually going to be taking the pattern card. It's a very interesting puzzle, has that similar thinking forward aspect. I guess all games have thinking a few moves ahead, but very similar feeling when I play Onitama. And additionally, Shobu. Shobu has this element of moving things around on different boards, and the way those things connect on different boards, and the way you can take over opponents as you transfer your movements around. Very interesting and similar puzzle. From Smirk and Dagger games, I believe, or maybe Smirk and Laughter. I always confuse the two, but very similar feeling, all of these 3 games, and the way they implement that abstract strategy, and the way they make you think on multiple planes at the same exact time. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you found this video helpful, and as always, have a good one.